is a program. Well, now it won't let me click through. What if I do this instead? There we go. This is a program that we have established at the recommendation, let's say, of some of our independent charter schools who we were meeting with in an effort to get them back into compliance. They had fallen out of compliance in a particular area with federal implications, and we were having a lot of intensive meetings in 2020 with these folks to get them back into compliance. And they said to me, almost offhandedly, hey, listen, Alex, we really want to be in compliance. We're not trying to skirt the law, but there's a lot going on here that we just didn't really know all the particulars of when we started. And it sure would have been nice if we had had the opportunity to, hear more about it. And I said, well, we can solve that problem. I can do something about that. And so that's sort of the impetus for LEA 101. And it's grown since then beyond just new charters to everyone, which I think is useful because, folks win the lottery and they go and, retire to Gulf Shores, Alabama, and you have a new business person who, is not familiar with the ins and outs of LEAs in Wisconsin. So we have a great lineup today. It is from 9 to 5. And I don't expect that most people, except for me and Dr. Hackett, are going to be here, or maybe the Veritas team, from 9 to 5. But if you are, we have some breaks built in, a lesson learned from LEA 101 version 1. And what I want you to do as you sit through this is tell me at the end, hey, I think this should be broken up into 2 days, or hey, we had people popping in and out, so it really wasn't that bad to do it in one fell swoop. So think about that as we go on. So we have this morning agenda. I've sort of tried to group it into subject area. So we got special education related things here in the front. Then we'll take a break. Then we got some licensure and accountability as we get to the lunch hour. Then we'll take an hour for lunch. This is a virtual meeting, so obviously you will be on your own for lunch. And then we have some WISEStaff and works going on the back end. Then we're going to have McKinney-Vento and our English learners team in the late afternoon. And then we're going to close it out with some finance stuff and some final remarks from me at 5 o'clock. As Dr. Hackett said, this is being recorded. So one, if that doesn't sit right with you, and you don't want your face or voice recorded, you're always welcome to hop off the call and it will be posted later. Two, remember that any question you ask is going to be recorded for posterity. So, if you feel that you have a question that you may not, that's sort of specific, or you don't want it, answered publicly and recorded forever, you're always welcome to reach out to me or anyone on the team offline via email or telephone and ask the question, that way as well. And then lastly, let's see, we are going to just chat briefly about your obligations as an LEA and then swing right into Margaret's presentation. So as you all know, independent charter schools in Wisconsin are their own local education agency. And so that means that all of the requirements that fall onto a district, like Kenosha, and I'm a native Kenoshan, so I'm going to pick on Kenosha a lot. It's not because I think Kenosha is wildly out of compliance, it's just because I love Kenosha, and I'm going to bring it up as much as possible. So all of the obligations that fall on KUSD and all of their staff down at their education support center are on you, on your little school, your little network. All of those obligations are still, have to be met, and you have to do them on your own. And so we are here to help you do that and help you navigate that. So civil rights, ADA, IDA, 504, all of those obligations your team has to do. And you're accountable to them through us, because we're accountable to the feds, right? And so there's these layers of accountability. The school leader is obviously responsible, the governing board who's responsible, the authorizer. We don't have, as you know, any real authority over how folks authorize. We certainly have suggestions. Our technical assistance center has a lot of resources, a tremendous amount of resources on every bit of this, on school development, on authorizing, and this is how we're going to help you stay in compliance. So just as a reminder, you know, when we reach out to you, or we or like, hey, you know, we think you're doing something wrong or incorrectly, it's not because we're trying to play gotcha. It's because we're trying to help you stay in compliance, because we have to stay in compliance with the feds and with state law, and we obviously want to protect student rights. And also, it's just, you know, it's the right thing to do. We're not trying to be compliance cops, but you know, we do all have work to do. So a couple disclaimers. This presentation is not all-encompassing or final. Things change. It is a 30,000 foot view. And as a LEA, you are responsible for knowing what I call the Google Street View, right? So you're going to have to know what color the door is on the street. But this is a presentation to help you see, okay, this is the landscape writ large. This is for informational purposes only. This is not legal advice. We are not your attorney. You should have an education attorney, not a torts attorney, an education attorney, because you are, as I said, running a school district all by yourself in your school. And you're going to want to have a lawyer who can help you navigate the complexities of the law. It's not me. It's not going to be anyone in the department. We want to help you stay in compliance, but we're not your attorneys. And please do not think of this as legal advice. Let's see, I think that's it for me. Okay, so I will toss it over to Margaret, who is going to kick us off with a discussion about special education and ICS. Margaret, do you want to take it away?
Thanks a lot, Alex. And I happen to be an extrovert who went to law school 45 years ago and has been at the Department of Public Instruction 40 years, one of the many lawyers that ended up in special ed at DPI. And I always want to tell people in these meetings, it's just so nice to see you all. There's some faces I've known for a long time, Kristine, Sarah, and it's wonderful to see so many new people in these roles. And I have to tell you, having been at the department 40 years, I think I really have an appreciation for the hard work that you do. It's very difficult to run a school. We get calls every day from staff and parents and school board members. It is tough work. The pandemic, I think, threw everybody for a loop. If you're in a small school, you know how difficult it is to hire and keep staff. You know that we just don't have as many kids as we used to in Wisconsin. You know, the baby boom's over. We're now approaching really small numbers in lots of schools. So keep up the good work and try and keep your chin up. But I think we all appreciate that this is really hard. And you folks are the good guys in all this because you're trying to make change and you're trying to do things to help families and children in this state. So my hat's off to you. Now, I have, like I mentioned, I've been at the department 40 years through several state superintendents. And I think the charter school movement is a really fascinating part of my 40 years. I was an actual consultant with this charter schools team for a while. And I've been with the equity team where we looked at Title IX, 6504, and I've been at the special ed team. So I feel that the department is here to help you. And I want to go through some resources in my presentation that you'll probably want to go back to again and again. So I think, Sarah, are you going to be my slide sorter today?
That is going to be me. I
that's
think
you, Alex. Okay.
I'm good at,
yeah.
Just let me know if I miss a cue, but I think I'm 4
okay,
years in.
Well,
I think I'm good.
Let's head on to the first slide here.
Good deal.
Thank you. All right, these are the 3 topics we're going to go over today. Evaluations, FAPE, the acronym you should all, tattoo on your arms, and then IEP development. So I'm going to touch on each of those a little more in my next presentation. So let's go on to the next slide. All right, as Alex touched on this in his opening remarks, that we have always kind of had the mantra that it is accountability actually is the second part of this tree, but the first part of the tree is sort of flexibility and autonomy in return for accountability. So you folks are part of a movement that really began with Al Shanker, who was the former president of the American Federation of Teachers way back in the 70s. And it comes out of the small schools movement. And Minnesota, I think, started the first public charter school. And the idea was we need to release school staff from some of the onerous bureaucratic requirements that they found themselves facing every day. So I think the charter school movement's been a really important movement in education across the United States to try and give people the freedom to try new things. And if you've been in Wisconsin for a while, you know we've had some really wonderful, innovative schools, independent charter schools as well as district-operated schools. So I think we have a very proud history. And part of our history, of course, is looking to see what works and what doesn't work. And I think that's where Sarah and Alex are really good resources to tell you about what they think has worked. So let's go on to the next one. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, this is a very important principle of federal and state non-discrimination law that comes into the charter school operations. In other words, children with disabilities cannot be discriminated against in admission. And where we see this happen sometimes is what we call counseling out. In other words, a family with a child with a disability will talk to a counselor at a charter school and say, you know, we'd really like to try this. And then subtly or not so subtly, the counselor, principal, whomever will say, well, you know, you might want to go to ABC school down the road because they really have much better facilities for your child than we do. You can't do that. Children have a right to attend charter schools, just like any other children with disabilities have a right to attend charter schools. So remember, these are supposed to be for all children, all right? Now, of course, we have lottery provisions, and probably somebody during the day might talk about lotteries. But just remember, non-discrimination is the principle in charter schools like it is in all public schools, okay? Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, now, the evaluation is sort of the gatekeeping function that happens in most charter schools. In other words, to get the special ed ball rolling, you have to have a system in place in your policies and procedures to accept referrals. And as this slide makes clear, anyone can make a referral. You might have a grandparent, neighbor, foster parent, whomever, come in and say, you know, I think my child needs to be looked at. There's some issues here I'm kind of worried about. So this needs to be in writing, needs to have the name of the child, and then sort of this rationale as to why they think this child might need to be looked at. They probably won't know the terminology evaluation or referral, but your staff needs to be prepared to handle inquiries from strangers that walk through the door who want to enroll in the school, but then think maybe their child has an issue that needs to be addressed. So hopefully before you open your doors, you'll have policies and procedures on who handles the referrals, and so that you don't miss this really important step. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, now this slide is just a requirement that several individuals are required to make referrals. So you'll get a lot of referrals from maybe pediatricians that see a child. You'll get referrals from county birth to 3 programs. You might get a social worker who works with a family, let alone your own staff who may have a child that after a semester or 2, they think maybe this child has some issues that we need to look at. So just remember, referrals are just the beginning, but they really need to be routinized and systematized so that you don't miss children. Because if you don't handle a referral, it could come back as a complaint. All right. So let's go on here. Now, this is where I want you to make a note here, because we have a really good bulletin on the evaluation process and timelines. And it's on the DPI website in the special ed team. So if you don't have this, it's bulletin 21.01. Okay. And this is a really good FAQ that goes through all of these sub-requirements in evaluation and specifically the timelines. And our website is dpi.wi.gov. Okay. And there are numerous resources on the special ed team website, but Bulletin 2101 is a really good one. And what this does is this slide shows you that the first thing the team is going to look at, and I'm going to get into who has to be in the IEP team in a minute, but you have to review existing data, because what you're doing is you're kind of making this first inquiry as to, well, what do we know about this child? What do we already collect that's going to tell us something about this child's needs? And this is going to help you determine as a team, do you need to get more assessment data on this child? If you need more assessment data, you have to get consent from the parents. And this is written consent from the parents. So as you're putting together your forms as a new school, you should have special ed forms in place so that you know that there's a form that a parent will have to consent to sign saying, I consent to these additional assessments. Okay. Now, having said that, there's a really good section on the DPI website with sample forms. It explains forms through the entire process of referral all the way through to placement, explains how the form's used, explains some of the tricky ramifications with the forms. So I just bookmarked the special ed sample forms in the DPI website because you're going to be coming back to those again and again. And I think the other key timeline on this slide is that you have 60 days from the point the parent consents for evaluation till you actually determine the eligibility. All right, so that's an important problem that some districts have in the summertime if they don't have staff around. Just because people are on summer vacation, you don't lose that requirement that you have to complete these and follow these timelines. And I think that's a common misperception that new school people have is, well, nobody's here in the summer, so we'll just take this up in September. That is not allowed by federal law. You have to follow this 60-day timeline. Okay. So again, look at Bulletin 2101. All right. So now let's go to the next slide. These are the disability categories in Wisconsin law. Okay. Not every state calls these the exact same thing. So if you're going to look at some other states' disability categories, they won't all be the same. But if you go into the DPI website, again, it's dpi.wi.gov, you'll see what constitutes autism, what constitutes deafblind. All of the sub-elements are listed, and you should probably have those all in your policies and procedures too, so that your teams know exactly what is meant when a child is labeled intellectually disabled. Okay. Now, let's go to the next slide here. All right. Now, this is an important concept too under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the federal law that governs special ed. And Wisconsin has adopted probably 90% of the federal law. So remember, though, having a child be determined to be a child with a disability who receives special ed is a two-part test. First of all, does this child meet the eligibility impairment criteria? If they don't meet the criteria for any of the disability areas, they're not a child that needs special ed. However, if they meet the criteria, then there's a second question the IEP team has to ask. And is that, does this child actually need special ed? Not every child that meets criteria needs special ed. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but this is an important thing for your team to remember. It's a two-part test, and not every child is going to qualify. All right. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay. If a child does not need special education, the child may need what's called a 504 plan. Now, most of you know about that, but there is confusion about that because the state of Wisconsin, a DPI, does not enforce Section 504. This is a federal law that's enforced by the OCR, which is the Office for Civil Rights. That's what OCR stands for, in Chicago. So complaints about 504 come to Chicago's OCR office. However, you can use the same process that you use to determine whether a child has a disability to determine if the child may not meet the two-part test, but still has an impairment that limits one of their major life activities, as the slide says. And then you can develop an accommodations plan for that child. So you can put together the same group of people to review everything and then decide, well, child doesn't meet disability criteria, but they still need some help and they do have a physical or mental impairment. Now, some of the common things that you might see would be children that may have generalized anxiety. They don't need specially designed instruction, but they might need some accommodations. They might need more time on tests. They might need preferential seating. They might need assignments revised, or children maybe with asthma, diabetes. There's certain things where child may need some accommodations, but they don't fit the criteria to be determined a child with a disability. Okay. Now, again, 504, there's quite a bit of stuff on our website about it, but the department is not responsible for enforcing this. This is a federal responsibility. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about LEA responsibility. Now, LEA is a term that not everybody's familiar with. They often say school district. Well, school districts have specific responsibilities, and LEAs are a little different because independent charter schools obviously are not school districts, but they are an LEA in the eyes of the law. So again, if you're looking at the tattoo on your arm that says FAPE, that stands for free, which means at no cost, and it's a public education. It's not a private school. And I think a lot of members of the general public think that charter schools are private schools, but they're not. They're public schools. Okay. And then some of them are virtual schools as well in state law. And the important thing to remember, if you're an LEA, which you are when you're an independent charter school, you are responsible for FAPE. And you will be monitored to ensure that you are meeting FAPE standards. And in Wisconsin, we have a 5-year cycle for reviewing all school districts and independent charter schools. So you won't be monitored in your first year of operation. But what will happen eventually is when it's your turn on the calendar, and the DPI website has a whole section on when monitoring happens and when you have to do a self-evaluation. Then what we will do is we will actually do an on-site visit for some schools to determine that they are looking at their own records accurately according to a rubric that we develop. And then we will actually review your records after you have done a self-assessment of your own records. Then we will ask you, well, what did you do to fix these when you found that there were some errors in standards? And then we will ask for a new sample to ensure that your team is evaluating your own records properly. Okay. So that will happen eventually, but there is a calendar out there with various schools, and you can check that later. But if you're new, you're not going to come up this first year. So you don't have to worry about that. And you'll have a lot of help from the CISA 1 folks if it's your turn, and I'll get to them in just a minute. Okay. Now, having said that, again, your responsibility here is to provide FAPE. And as I noted in my opening remarks, it's really tough to find aides right now. It's tough to find and keep special ed teachers. And we can appreciate that. It's a very difficult time. And our former director for the state, Barb Leadholm, has been working hard on a project to, help find more special education teachers. And we need to do something because morale is really tight right now. Well, tight's not the word. I think morale is challenged right now in this area. So you have a hard job. It's hard to find and keep aides, and you can appreciate that. But when you're going to open a school as an LEA, you are responsible. Okay. So let's go on to the next slide. What is FAPE again? I think the most important point on this slide, in addition to being free, is the services that you are offering to a child and the child's family have to be provided in conformity with an IEP. In other words, you're doing what you said you were going to do. And I think we probably get more complaints from parents about this than any other subject. And let me give you an example. A parent will call and say, this school district said they were going to do XYZ for my daughter. well, they're doing ABC and they're not doing XYZ. So then what we will do is we will initiate a complaint investigation. We will talk to the staff. We will talk to the parents. We will review documentation to ensure that you are actually providing the services that you've outlined in the IEP. So this is an important document to ensure that you're putting everything that you're doing for this child in the IEP, and then you're following it. Okay? Let's go on to the next slide. All right. Rowley and Andrew F. These are two very important U.S. Supreme Court decisions that I think improved upon the special education across the United States. And the first one is Rowley in 82. But Rowley, there were a lot of difficulties when various courts and school districts tried to analyze what Rowley actually meant. What did it mean to be reasonably calculated to enable a child to receive a benefit? Is this the minimal, or do you have to do the maximum? And there was just a lot of controversy, and I don't think anybody was trying not to follow law. I think it was just confusing. So the Supreme Court came back in 2017 and tried to clarify what was meant. And what Rowley really, what Andrew F. really does is say that this child needs to have some challenging objectives in the IEP. In other words, you can't have an IEP that every year does the exact same goals with no progress. That does not meet the standard of Andrew F. The general standard usually is the child should be progressing from grade to grade like other children. So it behooves you to ensure that the program you're designing in the IEP meets the unique disability-related needs of this child so that this child can have some success and progress, okay? So we have both of those decisions on our website. You might want to take a look at them, but the idea is you really can't do the same thing over and over and over again. That doesn't work. And we've had numerous complaints about parents that say, my child's had these same goals since kindergarten, and they're now, middle school. What's going wrong? It's not working. So Andrew F. now says you really need to take a closer look at this, LEAs, and figure out what's not working here, and you should come back and maybe redesign this IEP for this child. Okay. So let's go on to the next slide, please. Now, again, here is the FAPE standard spelled out. Okay, so you're looking at the child's unique needs. How can this child make progress? And then you have to document this in the IEP. Then you have to implement it. So again, documentation is very important. People will say, well, we talked about it at the meeting and everybody understood what that meant. Well, that doesn't meet the standard. You need to put things in the IEP that you're going to do, because we've all been in meetings where everyone walks away with a very different interpretation of what was said. The IEP really is the contract to what you say you're going to do for these students and this family. And then you have to do it, okay? So let's move on again. Let's get on to the IEP team requirements. I think this isn't new for most of you, but these people have to be at the team meeting, and we will review records to ensure that everybody's at the team meeting. And I think most schools do this correctly. I think the important thing to remember is that other people can attend besides staff, and parents can ask that certain advocates come within the meetings, and they have a right to bring people. And as the children are older, as this last bullet point shows, they need to be there to talk about transition. So by and large, you don't get too many complaints about this, though. I think most people do this right because it's a pretty standard list. But it's a lot of work. I mean, teachers complain about the number of IEP meetings they have to do, and we probably all dealt with parents that just ask for meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, and that's diplomatically that's a difficult situation. Okay, let's get on to IEP contents here. Okay, these are the 5 areas we're going to spend a little more time on, and then the DPI website, again, that's dpi.wi.gov, has a really good section called CCR IEP, which is college and career ready IEPs. And that goes through in great detail the root cause analysis and ways you should have your staff really looking at what are the child's disability related needs and how are we going to turn that into goals and how are we going to review these goals after a year to see if they're making progress. And then the services, the last one on that slide is, of course, are there related services or supplementary aids and services that the child needs? So these are the major parts of an IEP. But again, I'd strongly advise you to start looking at the CCR IEP materials that are on the DPI website. So let's go on to the next one for special education. Okay, I think the important principle in this slide is that special ed isn't formulaic. In other words, you don't design the same IEP goals for every child that has specific learning disabilities. You just don't. This IEP is individualized and it's based on the child's individual needs, and your instruction should be designed to meet their individual needs. Not every kid with EBD or SLD has the exact same IEP. That's a problem because then you're violating the underlying principle of individualization. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide then. Okay, so I just talked about that. These IRPs are based on individual needs. And again, the F standard for the second bullet point is it needs to be ambitious. In other words, parents are just so concerned that their children are not succeeding and making progress. So you as an IEP team need to figure out, well, what should we be doing differently to help this child succeed and move from grade to grade? Okay, but it is, again, it's based on the individual child's needs. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, implementation. Again, this is a contract. You have to do what you said you're going to do. It needs to be, you need to be able to document what you are doing. When we have a complaint investigation, often we may talk to a teacher and say, well, yeah, we did that. We worked on that goal. Well, what's your proof that you worked on the goal? What documentation do you have that you did this 5 days a week for 20 minutes each day? Or your counselors, you said the counselor was supposed to do 20 minutes once a week. How does the parent know that you ever did that? What documentation do you have? So again, I think it's really important that you're documenting things. And then I think this slide also reminds you that you need to have an IEP in place at the start of the school year. Now, this is really important for your own policies and procedures. In other words, are you going to have staff available to start working on these things before your doors open? And we have quite a few children that transfer from school district to school district. And I'm going to give you another bulletin number that you might want to print out and give to staff. And this is 1301. And this is all about how to handle transfer students, both within the state of Wisconsin and outside the state of Wisconsin, because they're a little different. Inside of the state of Wisconsin, you can look at the IEP team and see if you can implement it immediately and can you accept this IEP, all right? Out of state, you have to start over with initial evaluation. So they are treated differently, but 1301 explains that. But I think the main principle is there needs to be an IEP in place at the start of the school year. Summer vacation is not an excuse for not having an IEP in place, okay? Let's go to the next slide. Okay, one of the big complaint issues that we also get in addition to implementation is behavior. And this is really tough for staff, teachers and aides it's a hard life if you have a child who has serious behavior problems. But as this slide reminds you, IDEA says that if a child's behavior is interrupting his learning or learning of other children, then you have to consider what are some positive behavioral interventions that you can put in this IEP. Now, this might require some serious thought. What is going to work for this child? Now, we're not talking about negative things. This is not, you're going to go to detention if this, or you're going to have this privilege. We're talking about positive things. And that can be things like this child may need to take breaks during the day. They may need to walk up and down a hall, kind of relax for a few minutes. They might need fidgets, something to kind of get rid of that extra energy. They might need different seating to help them stay focused. They might need, what am I looking at? Well, those are kind of the primary ones, or maybe some sort of reward system. Some people will do that. But again, these are positive things to try and help children come to the behavior so that they can learn, and then other children can learn too. Okay. Now, again, if a child's behavior becomes a problem and you're suspending and expelling them all the time, you probably need to be looking at what are we not doing to help this child? What should we be doing as far as positive interventions? Okay. And then if you're offering a virtual school, this is really tricky. And the IEP team's going to have to figure out, okay, even though they're not in a bricks and mortar place, what can we be doing to help this child relax, stay calm, stay focused? And maybe it's just a little bit different delivery system. In other words, instead of going from class to class to class virtually, this child gets a break between classes. Or you may be modifying the assignments somehow at the virtual school. But this requires a little bit of thought and planning by the IEP team. But again, you want to do this early on so the behavior doesn't just blow up and become a huge problem down the line. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. This is important. Again, a reminder that if you fail to address these needs and comes in as a complaint with us, we might consider denial of FAPE, or we might say that you're not serving the child in the least restrictive environment. Okay. Now, we have Bulletin 2301. I want to draw your attention to that. Bulletin 2301 is all about positive behavioral supports. And it just came out last year, and I think it's really good in helping IEP teams think about this. Okay. And then we also, the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, is the federal office within the U.S. Department of Ed that provides a lot of technical assistance to states. And OSEP puts out what they call Dear Colleague letters, where they're opining on an issue. And there's a Dear Colleague letter from 2016 that talks about these behavioral requirements apply no matter what the child's disability. So just because a child may have just speech and language issues and you don't consider that the same level of seriousness as maybe EBD, they still have a right to some of these positive behavioral supports. So don't get stuck on the idea that, well, only the EBD kids need this or the OHI kids who are autistic. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. Now, in the few minutes I've left, I just really want to talk about some of these resources. The IEP forms and forms guide are on the DPI website. Bookmark those, go back to those all the time. I mean, I've been doing this for 40 years and I still have to look back all the time on these things. And I think they're really helpful resources. Our model policies and procedures are out there for you to look at. And they're really helpful if you're for new school to kind of make sure everybody's on the same page with, okay, what happens with our forms and how do we handle referrals, evaluations, placement, whatever. And as I mentioned earlier, the CCR IEP framework really goes through the root cause analysis and how you can decide what this child's disability-related needs are and what should we be doing as an IEP to create some goals based on the benchmarks and what level of attainment can this child have at the end of the year. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I want to put in a big plug for CISA 1. And two names that you need to know are Linda Baldus and Kathy Kramer. And Linda does a lot of the substantive technical assistance for all of you through a contract that the department gives to CISA 1 to give you help. Their whole purpose is to give you help with this because special education, there's over 700 rules and regs and IDEA, and it's not easy. So Kathy and Linda are both there, and I'm just going to give you Linda's phone number at CISA 1. It's 262-787-9500. So Linda, and then Kathy, you introduced yourself earlier. And I'm so glad that you're there too, because a lot of the fiscal issues are so important for new schools because you want to get your money. And Kathy can help you get your money. And then some other resources I wanted to certainly refer you to are, Sarah was on earlier, and she's the head of WRCCS, Wisconsin Resource Center for Charter Schools. Sarah is a font of information. She's been doing this work 10, 15 years and knows everything. Alex at the department knows everything. So we're all here to help you because we realize this is not easy. And then, excuse me, I wanted to just draw your attention to 2 more resources on the website. We have Bulletin 24.01. That is on shortened school day. That just came out. And this is a huge problem now in all schools. And what we're trying to get away from are schools sending kids home for disciplinary reasons. That is not allowable. You cannot put a child on a shortened school day for disciplinary purposes. The only times kids should be on a shortened school day should be maybe if they have a medical reason that they can't be in school. There are very few situations in which a child should be on a shortened day. And then the IEP team has to be looking at what's the problem, why does this child need to be on a shortened day, and then how are we going to bring this child back? Because these kids should be brought back to school. They have a right to be in school, and they should, by law, must be in school. So take a look at that bulletin, because we've had lots of complaints about shortened school day, and that's an important. The other section on our website that I really want to draw your attention to are the information we have on seclusion and restraint. The department's very worried about a lot of the numbers we see in elementary schools now and the number of children who've been secluded and restrained. It's just shocking. So we're trying to really dwell down and do an extra review of some of these schools where this is happening, because when you see a lot of first and second graders being secluded or restrained, we just have to figure out what is going on. So on the DPI website, there's a really good question and answer from March of 2022 that talks a lot about how to deal with the staff training, what you can do to improve your numbers. So I know that was kind of a quick overview, so I can maybe take 1 or 2 questions, and I know we're trying to go right on in a minute or 2, right? Or you can get in touch with me later, or Alex or Sarah, Linda, are we running out of time here?
Yeah, we're 5 minutes over. So if anyone has a quick question, now is your chance. Otherwise, of course, Margaret is always available to help.
I guess the quick question I would have, so I'm coming from a public charter school in Arizona, and in Arizona, there's laws about screening for disability for all new students that are coming into a school. Does Wisconsin have anything comparable, or is it reliant on the particular school to have its own policies?
Maybe Alex or Sarah, I think kids get screened for hearing and vision automatically in most schools.
Okay.
Through school nurses and things like that. I don't know. Do you 2 want to opine on that?
I don't know that I have the answer to that right now, John, but if you shoot me an email to remind me that I owe you that answer, I'm happy to track it down for you.
Yeah, because I think that's very typical. Children coming into elementary school for the first time, they'll want to know, can they see and hear? But that's different than admittance and keeping somebody out because of a disability.
Right. Well, and what I'm talking about is disability screening. So there's a screening questionnaire that the teachers of all new students go over to screen for disabilities as just a standard thing.
If you were to ask the question of, did you have an IEP in your private school? That's a little different. Depends on, I guess, what you were doing with that information, because of course you want to get records from another district. But if you're using that as a method to tell children, sorry, I just don't think we have what you need here, that's discriminatory. Can you see the difference there?
Yeah, I think that's still not even what I'm talking about. Okay. Once we've accepted students to, like you were talking about, figure out if a student needs, when you were talking about referrals.
Right, right. You can do a review of existing data. So if you have data from their doctor, that's great. And if you decide you want to do some additional testing, then you have to have parent consent.
John, are you saying that everybody in Arizona, regardless of if they get a referral, like everyone goes through a screening?
Yes. So every new student at an Arizona public school there's a form that we go through looking at different possible categories for disability, so that if there's anything, they get we see it early, and it has to take place within the first 45 days of the student being at the school. So all new kindergartners and then any transfer student automatically go through a, like, are we seeing anything that would make us think that this kid should be referred for SPED services? I was wondering if there's anything like that in Wisconsin. It sounds like not. So
yeah, I don't think so. But clearly, if someone had a reason that they thought a child should be referred, as you saw on that slide, they can be referred by anybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's not a statute comparable in Wisconsin.
We have child find.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Younger scholars.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, child find usually, I think often child find comes from, pediatricians, public health nurses, social workers who are seeing these kids early on, or counties.
Okay.
And then, the district, then an LEA has an obligation if under child find, as Christy pointed out, to figure out, well, do these kids need help? Do we need to be referring?
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Margaret, for taking the time to chat with us today. Courtney, are you on the call?
Alex, we have one other hand up too. I don't know if
oh, I can't
we
see
can
that on
just
my end.
like real quick
go ahead.
maybe set something up there.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Dr. Paige Tyler. I just missed a little bit of the introductions. I just wanted to say hi to everybody. I do work with Linda Baldus, so with the independent charter schools with CISA 1. So some of you may be hearing from me soon as well. So I just wanted to say hi. Nice to meet everybody.
Good enough. Yeah, CISA 1 folks are the best. So put them on speed dial. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Good morning. This is Courtney. I'm here, Alex. So whenever you know.
Yeah, I am ready. I will click through. If I miss a cue, just tell me to go to the next slide.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Reed Jenkins. I work on the special education team here at the Department of Public Instruction. I've worked on the special education team for about 25 years, and I am here to talk to you about something called joint federal notification. So I'm going to start by saying thank you for the work that you do. I am so pleased at the way in which we are moving to offer different ways of learning to a whole bunch of kids. I have a daughter who was in charter school for until she graduated. I have another daughter who was out of charter school and in and out of a lot of different places. And I also serve on the governing board for a local charter school. So I know the work that you do. I know how it affects people's lives. And the story I just want to share is that Ada, my older daughter, was in charter school from 8th grade to 12th grade and then went off to college. And we were on vacation. We went up to Ashland and Bayfield for a week last week, and her charter school teacher, the lead teacher at her charter school, had moved up closer to Lake Superior last year. And so Ada reached out, and they spent the morning together, and they have such a deep and special relationship. And I'm I feel so lucky that she had that kind of learning. So I want to say thank you to everyone on the call for the work that you're doing, and it makes a difference. I am going to be moving I'm going to be opposite of Margaret in so many different ways. The first way is that she was so beautifully focused on what federal special education law means for individual students. And I'm going to go way up high and say, what does federal law mean for charter schools in terms of things that you may come across over this next year? I'm also going to be different than Margaret because, I've worked as a professional I've never remembered to print out my slide deck, and I wish I had. I'm in a hotel right now, and the internet is a little bit wonky because of the national blackouts and surges. So the slide deck that Alex is showing is as much a surprise to me as to you. So hold on for the ride. Here we go. There are two big federal laws that I'm talking about this morning that apply to charter schools. The first is the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, which really provides civil rights and protections for kids when they are identified with a disability and have an IEP. And the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is an investment from the federal government for enhancing outcomes for all students with a particular focus on communities that serve high numbers of students whose families qualify for free and reduced price lunches, which is our proxy for socioeconomic status. Both of these laws at heart are really laws that focus on racial and social justice. They're civil rights laws that say that the way in which schools serve all kids don't benefit some specific groups of kids. And so this is an infusion of federal dollars to repair the harm that has been done to kids with disabilities, kids who are learning English, kids who are in lower socioeconomic statuses, and other protected classes. And both of these federal laws have requirements at the state level for the state education agency to every year collect and analyze data for each of the schools and districts that receive the money. And our job is to look at data that really relates to and is aligned with research around what do we know leads to the best outcomes for kids once they leave K-12. And in the world of IDEA, then, we put all LEAs, including charter schools, into 4 identification categories each year. The first identification category is meets requirements. The second, and that holds no required actions. The second category is needs assistance. The third category is needs intervention. And the fourth category is needs substantial intervention. And those 3 categories trigger required action under federal law. That means then that charter schools also have to do those actions. And also under IDEA, we look at the data every year on who's enrolled in the school and who's identified for special education. And we identify whether or not there's race-based patterns in special education, which means that a district has significant disproportionality in special ed and has required actions or not. Under the Every Student Succeeds Act, the department analyzes data on all the kids in the state, and they identify them from different perspectives like race, socioeconomic status, language status, disability status, and they identify schools into 4 buckets as well. The first bucket is that there is no identification, and so there's no required actions. And then the other 3 identifications are comprehensive support and improvement, targeted support and improvement, and additional targeted support and improvement. And those do carry required federal actions. So for the remainder of our time together, I'm going to unpack some of the data that we looked at and then look at what's required when a district meets one of the identification categories, and then how to find out whether your charter school has attached federal required actions or not. So under the Every Student Succeeds Act, there are 3 identification categories. The least severe, or the category that attaches the fewest amount of required actions, is targeted support and improvement. And what this means is that there's gaps between student groups at the school. So you might see that students with disabilities don't perform as well as students without disabilities on the statewide assessment. You might see that Black students are disciplined more than other students in your school. And so then targeted support and improvement requires you to address those gaps. Additional targeted support and improvement is also a gaps-based analysis. It's between student groups and it's more severe. So it's there are bigger gaps between student groups. And the final category is comprehensive support and improvement. And that is an identification that compares all of the schools that receive Title I all over the state, and schools that are identified as comprehensive support and improvement are schools that are in the bottom 5% of performing schools in the state. So I'm ready for the next slide, please. So the way that we look at the data for Every Student Succeeds Act is you submit the data to us. So it's data that comes from the school and it comes into WISEData. So you might be doing this as a charter school, or the authorizing organization or district might submit this information to DPI through WISEData. WISEData usually hits against your student information system. And then we prepare the data at DPI and make sure that the data that's snapped in December is valid and reliable. And then we start to look at the data around in different categories like student achievement, student growth, graduation, absenteeism, progress for English learner students. And then after we do all of this analysis internally, we create summary scores that populate a report for each LEA that contains identifications. Next slide, please. We look at a variety of different data sources because we believe that one data source isn't going to tell us the complete picture. And frankly, not even all of the different data sources that we use tell us the complete picture of what's happening at the charter school. This is our best thinking about a fair formula at the state level to apply to all 440 some odd of our local education agencies. And again, it's at that 30,000 foot level. So we look at data from the state test, we look at graduation rates, we look at absenteeism rates or rates of attendance, and then we look specifically at growth and progress for English learners. Next slide, please. So there are criteria when schools are identified that result in them exiting their identification status. And they are both technical criterion, like you have to be below the identification threshold, but then there's also adaptive criteria like demonstrating evidence of internal systems of control to maintain and sustain the work that you put into improvement. Next slide, please. Under the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, again, there's a range of identifications from least severe to most severe, and the required actions that attach to each of those buckets increase in terms of the amount of time, commitment, and monitoring oversight that the Department of Public Instruction has. And most of the districts that are in these 3 categories are in the needs assistance with a very light amount of monitoring and support from the Department of Public Instruction. Out of the 400 plus LEAs, we have 0 in the needs substantial intervention category, and we have anywhere from 5 to 10 a year in needs intervention. Next slide, please. When we look at the districts under the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, we look at both student outcome data, so things like how are students with disabilities faring as it relates to graduation, dropout, test participation and proficiency, as well as compliance areas, because we believe that a school that has a foundation of systems that are in compliance with special education law have a better chance of success at closing at improved outcomes for students with disabilities. So we look at things like, are your initial evaluations conducted on time under the law? And do all of your students who are 14 and older have transition plans? And when you do have identifications of non-compliance, how do you correct that non-compliance? Next slide, please. So every LEA, and this includes charter schools, receive reports. There is a preliminary report that is released every February and a final report that is released every April. And those reports are uploaded into the Secure Access File Exchange, which is how DPI shares confidential information with districts. And so every school has a joint federal notification packet that is already in state. So you can go back and look at the the packet that was released in April of 2024, and you know that it's coming again next spring. And this is data that is used for continuous improvement and support, in addition to identifying what required actions the school is expected to do. Next slide, please. So one of the things that is important to the department for all LEAs, including charter schools, is that we work hard to align our work so that it's easier on the school and district to get their information, identify what happens next, and move forward with requirements under federal law. So that's the joint federal notifications. Instead of getting an ESSA report and then an IDEA report, and then having your own school and district improvement plans, we've really put this into one packet. And we've invested money and services from both Title I and special ed into a continuous improvement model that we've trained CISAs around the state, including Linda and Kathy at CISA 1, to be able to engage schools in moving through a continuous improvement process. Next slide, please. So the bottom line, there's a data snapshot every December. So ensuring that your data is accurate is the best way for us to be able to know that it's valid and reliable data flowing from the school to DPI, so that when we do the data analysis at the state level, we're hitting against accurate data about what's happening in real time for your students on the ground. In February and then in April, you'll need to access the Secure Access File Exchange to review your packet of information from the 2 federal laws, IDEA and ESSA. And then anytime, and including when you get those packets next spring, there is support to engage in continuous improvement through Linda, as well as through other CISAs around the state. They've been trained in using a data inquiry process, which is embedded in our data system here at DPI, so that you can pull data and use an improvement process in one easy place. And that is it for my presentation. I am happy to take questions from folks, or absolutely feel free to reach out to me at any point in time.
Thank you, Courtney. Does anyone have any questions? I was never a teacher, so I'm not going to wait time. Okay, it doesn't sound like there are any questions. Again, Courtney is, and this is true of everyone in the department, you can always reach us by telephone or email. I think Helen is here, and Helen is going to share her screen. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Helen share. I think Dr. Hackett is going to have to make you a co-presenter. I don't know. I have no idea.
Oh,
'cause
you're
don't
right.
use-
I
don't
am.
know
I'll
use
do that now.
Zoom.
Did we lose Helen? Oh, there she is.
No,
Okay.
I'm right here.
Yep, perfect. Things
Hi.
got out of order. All right, now you're a co-host. You should be able to share, Helen.
All right. There we go. Is everyone seeing my webpage here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, looks good.
All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for letting me come speak to you today. My name is Helen Leong. I'm the consultant at DPI for the Special Needs Scholarship Program. You might have noticed I said the consultant. That is because this is a very small program. The likelihood that you would run into it is not high, but Alex is very kind to give me the opportunity to just introduce the program to you a little bit so that hopefully if you ever do get any contacted about it, you might remember having had me today, and then you'll know generally what it's relating to. So the Special Needs Scholarship Program is one of the voucher programs here in the state of Wisconsin. It is not a choice program. So when you think about voucher programs in the state of Wisconsin, you might automatically go to the Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or Racine Parental Choice Program. That does exist, and it is a very large program, but we are a small, tiny corner of the voucher of a different voucher program from the choice programs. The reason that I wanted to get a chance to talk to everybody today is part of the eligibility criteria for this program is that a student applying would need to have an IEP or a services plan in order to qualify for this particular voucher program. And the way that that is verified is that the private school where the student wants to attend will email the LEA and ask for this verification. So that is my reason for coming and talking to you today, is that in case you ever get one of these emails saying the student is applying to the Special Needs Scholarship Program, I just wanted you to have heard of it and have some steps that you could potentially take in order to make sure that you can comply with the email request. So this is our web page here. This is the main landing page. At the bottom of each web page is my contact information. So I know it says SNSP at dpi.wi.gov, and that is a general email box, but there's only one consultant, and it's me. So 99.9% of the time when you are emailing that, it is me that you are corresponding with. I do like to encourage people to use this email box because if for some reason I was out or unavailable, then someone else would be able to get your questions and answer them for you. So what happens with this particular program is that the family will apply for the program. They will indicate that they have an IEP or a services plan. So in your case, it's going to be, the student had an IEP developed, and then they list the LEA that developed it. So that can include, as you know, an independent charter school. So they would put that on there. And then when the private school is processing the application, they would send you an email. Now, can you see this screen as well? Did it change
No,
for
we
you?
cannot. It is the
Okay.
same screen.
All right. Give me just a moment to share a different screen. I apologize. It is very specific to the window I have open. So this is generally what the email should look like when you get, oh, I'm sorry. I have to push the share button. So this is generally what it would look like. So it would say, this email is to notify you the student has been found eligible to participate in the special needs scholarship program, and then it would supply some specific information about that student. So you would review the eligibility criteria that are all included in this email and determine whether or not the student had an IEP that met this eligibility criteria. One quick thing that I'm going to throw in there, but don't feel like you have to remember everything about what I'm talking about, is that the eligibility criteria is time specific, meaning there's a window of eligibility for that IEP. So it's a 3-year look back. So each school year, the eligibility criteria change slightly, and then that 3-year window, you know, kind of moves up each year. So that information is included in the email. And in order to process this LEA request, or excuse me, this LEA verification request, you would just email back to the private school. So push reply to this email. You would attach the student's IEP if they met the eligibility criteria, and then you would be done. So that's the entire process right there. You get an email, you reply, you double check whether the student meets the eligibility criteria. If they do, you reply and attach the IEP to that email reply. I don't expect you to get a lot of these. So the main thing that I want everybody to remember is that there is this program that does exist. And if you get, let's see, I think it's, which one am I sharing now? Oh, I'm sorry, not that one. If you do get this email and you have questions, you can contact me and I will walk you through the process of how it works. Included in that email is a link where we do have a frequently asked questions for public school districts. So you can feel free to use that resource if you find that helpful when you're looking at this information. But I'm mostly here just to make sure you're aware of this particular voucher program. We're pretty small. We don't have nearly the many of students and schools participating that the choice programs do. So sometimes folks aren't familiar with this particular program. So this is just specifically for students that have an IEP or a services plan that's been developed for them to attend a private school and receive a voucher payment. Let me just double check my notes, see if there's anything else. If you are interested in learning more to get to that frequently asked questions for public school districts, it is available here. So you would just click on the student application and transfer request. And then that first thing is that frequently asked questions. And like I said, the link to this page should be in the email that you get. Oh, the one other thing with the email, you do need to reply within 5 business days. I apologize. That is one of the requirements under state law. So, but like I said, if you get an email that says you have a student that's applied for the special needs scholarship program, if you have any questions, my email is at the bottom of every page for the special needs scholarship program. You can even just go to DPI's website, type in special needs. My website should be the first thing that pops up, and then there's my contact information. You can call me, you can email me. I'm happy to talk it through with you. Our main thing is just trying to help new LEAs understand that this is something that could potentially come across your desk, though I would say it doesn't happen very often. So, any questions?